Sun had barely begun its slow crawl over the horizon when Ravi, a 35-year-old laborer, wiped the sweat from his brow and tightened the grip on his worn-out shovel. The city was waking up, but he had already been at work for hours, hauling bricks at a construction site. His hands, calloused and bruised from years of relentless labor, told the story of a man who had fought against the odds his entire life. For as long as Ravi could remember, struggle had been his shadow. Born into poverty, he had learned early that dreams were a luxury only a few could afford. Education had never been an option, survival came first. While other children played with toys, Ravi had carried sacks of cement. While they attended school, he had worked in the scorching sun, trying to earn enough to feed his younger siblings. But deep inside, a fire still burned. He wanted more. He wanted change. The problem was opportunities didn't come knocking for people like him. Every day was the same. The site's supervisor barked orders. The workers toiled endlessly, and at the end of it all, Ravi would receive his meager daily wage, barely enough to bring home food. He worked in silence, listening to the chatter of his coworkers. Most had accepted their fate. They laughed, joked, and spoke of dreams that would never be fulfilled. But Ravi refused to let his fate be written for him. One evening, as the workers sat under a half-built structure for their short break, Ravi overheard a conversation that made his heart race. "The contractor is looking for someone to manage supplies," a man murmured. "Pays twice as much as a laborer's wage." "Yeah, but he wants someone who can read and write," another scoffed. "Not one of us." The words hit Ravi hard. Not one of us. A sharp ache settled in his chest. Why did the world assume that just because he was a laborer, he was incapable? Was his fate really sealed? Or was there a way out? That night, as he walked home on the uneven, dusty roads, he made a decision. He wouldn't let his circumstances define him. Ravi didn't know where to start, but he knew he had to learn. There was a small library near the market, a place he had never dared to enter before. It was meant for students, for educated men in crisp shirts. He was just a laborer in torn clothes. But opportunities don't wait. Swallowing his fear, he stepped inside. The librarian, an elderly man with kind eyes, looked up in surprise. "Can I borrow a book?" Ravi asked, his voice hesitant. The librarian studied him for a moment before nodding. "Of course. What are you looking for?" I want to learn how to read and write." The old man's expression softened. Without a word, he handed Ravi a simple book with large letters. "Start here." The first few nights were agonizing. Ravi sat under the dim light of a street lamp, tracing his fingers over the letters, whispering the words to himself. His hands, built for labor, struggled to hold a pen. His mind, conditioned for work, wrestled with unfamiliar letters. He failed, over and over again. But every time frustration threatened to take over, he reminded himself of one thing: opportunities don't wait. Each night, he pushed forward. He practiced, stumbled, and practiced again. Some workers mocked him. "What's the point?" they sneered. "You think learning a few words will change your life?" Ravi didn't respond. He knew the answer. Weeks passed, and Ravi improved. He still struggled, but he was learning. One evening, as he was practicing in a quiet corner of the site, the contractor himself walked by. A well-dressed man with a sharp gaze. He paused when he saw Ravi with a book. "What are you reading?" he asked. Ravi hesitated, but held up the book. "I'm trying to learn, sir." The contractor raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Ravi took a deep breath. "Because I want to do more than just carry bricks. I want to understand things. I want to grow." The contractor didn't say anything at first. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. "Come see me tomorrow morning." Ravi's heart pounded in his chest. Was this it? His chance? Or was it just another cruel trick of fate? Or so he thought. Ravi barely slept that night. His mind raced with possibilities. Why had the contractor asked to see him? Would it be an opportunity or a humiliating end to his dream? As the sun rose, he washed his face, combed his hair, and put on the cleanest shirt he owned, though it was still faded and torn in places. He couldn't afford new clothes, but he could control his determination. When he arrived at the site, the contractor was already there, speaking with the supervisors. He noticed Ravi immediately and motioned him forward. "You said you want to grow," the contractor said, arms crossed. "You're learning to read?" Ravi nodded. "Yes, sir." The contractor pulled out a sheet of paper and placed it on the table. The words were simple, but for Ravi, they might as well have been in another language. His hands trembled as he traced the first few letters with his eyes, trying to make sense of them. The workers gathered around, watching, whispering. "Well?" The contractor raised an eyebrow. "Can you read it?" Ravi swallowed hard. This was his moment. He sounded out the first word, his voice shaky but firm. Then the second. The letters blurred, but he forced himself to focus. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he read, halting but determined. The workers snickered, but he ignored them. By the time he finished the sentence, the contractor was smiling. "Not bad," he said. "You need practice. A lot of it. But I can see you're serious." Ravi let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I am, sir." The contractor leaned in. "Then prove it. Be here after your shift. I'll give you real work, inventory, records, numbers. If you can." That night, after hours of backbreaking labor, Ravi stayed behind. While the other workers went home, he sat at a wooden table, struggling over rows of numbers and names. His body ached, his fingers cramped, but he refused to quit. The contractor's assistant, a young man named Arjun, supervised him. "You're slow," he said bluntly, tapping the ledger. "If you make mistakes, the whole supply chain falls apart." Ravi nodded. "I understand. I'll get better." And he did. Every night he practiced. When his muscles ached from lifting bricks all day, he reminded himself, opportunities don't wait. When his eyelids drooped, begging for sleep, he repeated, opportunities don't wait. When doubt crept in, whispering that he was just a laborer, that he didn't belong here, he silenced it. He would earn his place. The breaking point. One evening, a month into his training, the contractor called him in. His heart pounded. "I have an assignment for you," the contractor said. "Tomorrow, you'll be in charge of inventory for one of the supply deliveries. You mess this up, you're done." Ravi's stomach twisted. He had come so far, but was he ready? That night, he didn't sleep. He went over every record, every calculation. He couldn't afford mistakes. The next morning, the truck arrived, loaded with materials. Ravi stood by the clipboard, marking each item as it was unloaded. At first, everything went smoothly, but halfway through, he noticed a problem. A stack of cement bags was missing. His hands trembled. Was it his mistake? Had he counted wrong? Arjun, the assistant, scowled. "You better not be wasting time." Ravi took a deep breath and double-checked. The numbers didn't match. A realization struck him. Someone was stealing. For years, he had seen corruption in small ways. Workers taking extra materials, supervisors turning a blind eye. But now he was in charge. And he had a choice. Stay silent, keep his job, or take a risk and speak up. He gritted his teeth. Opportunities don't wait. "Sir," Ravi said, walking up to the contractor. "The numbers don't match. We're missing supplies." The contractor's expression darkened. He called for an audit. Within minutes, the theft was uncovered. A supervisor had been pocketing supplies, assuming no laborer would dare challenge him. The contractor turned to Ravi. "You caught this?" "Yes, sir." For a moment, the older man studied him. Then he nodded. "Good work. Keep up, the job is yours." That evening, as the sun set over the site, Ravi was called into the office. "You've proven yourself," the contractor said. "Starting tomorrow, you're officially on the records team. Higher pay, less physical labor, but more responsibility." Ravi couldn't believe it. His hands, once only meant for lifting bricks, would now hold ledgers and sign documents. The workers whispered, some in disbelief, some in admiration. And as Ravi walked out of that office, he knew he had taken his chance. He had rewritten his fate. Ravi could barely believe it. He was no longer just a laborer. For years, his hands had been covered in dust, carrying bricks and cement. But now they held ledgers and papers. He had climbed a step higher, but he wasn't done yet. The real challenge was just beginning. Stepping into the records office felt like entering another world. The air was cooler, the walls lined with shelves of files and books. Unlike the open, sun-scorched construction site, this place was quiet, filled with the scratching of pens and the tapping of calculators. But it didn't take long for Ravi to feel out of place. The other clerks, men in neatly pressed shirts, glanced at him with curiosity, some with amusement. He was still the laborer who had suddenly been placed among them. The supervisor, Mr. Mehra, was an elderly man with sharp eyes. He handed Ravi a stack of documents. These need to be recorded in the system. Accuracy is key. One mistake, and the whole supply chain gets delayed. Ravi nodded, but as he sat down at the desk, doubt crept in. He had spent weeks learning, but this was different. The numbers swam before his eyes, and the pressure felt suffocating. The other clerks worked swiftly, their hands moving effortlessly over the documents. He was slower, hesitant. And then it happened. A mistake. A simple miscalculation in inventory numbers that caused confusion during a delivery. The contractor was furious. "You are doing so well, Ravi. What happened?" Ravi swallowed hard. "I miscounted." The voices of his old co-workers echoed in his mind. "You think learning a few words will change your life? You're just a laborer." Maybe they were right. Maybe this was as far as he could go. That night, Ravi walked home feeling crushed. Had he reached his limit? Had he tried to climb too high, too fast? But then, as he passed the construction site, he saw the workers still toiling under the harsh lights. Sweat dripped from their bodies as they lifted heavy loads, their muscles strained from exhaustion. The same exhaustion he had once known so well. And in that moment, he realized something. He had a choice. He could give up and return to the life he knew, or he could fight harder than ever before. Ravi clenched his fists. He had come too far to stop now. The next morning, he arrived early at the office. He studied the records before anyone else arrived. He practiced calculations, learned new techniques, and memorized every format. He asked questions, even when it embarrassed him. Days turned into weeks, and Ravi refused to let failure define him. He got better, faster, more accurate, more confident. The clerks who once looked at him with amusement now nodded in approval. Even Mr. Mehra noticed. "You've improved, Ravi," he said one afternoon. "You've become one of our best record keepers." Ravi smiled. "Because I don't give up, sir." One day, the contractor called Ravi into his office. "I've been watching you," he said, tapping his desk. "You're smart, hardworking, and loyal. And you understand laborers better than anyone else." Ravi nodded, unsure where this was going. "I need a site supervisor. Someone to manage workers, materials, and records." The contractor leaned forward. "I want that person to be you." Ravi's heart stopped. A supervisor? The same kind of position where once people had ordered him around? He could barely speak. "Me, sirs?" "Yes, you." The contractor smiled. "Do you want it?" Ravi didn't even have to think. "Yes." A week later, Ravi stood at the construction site, but this time, he wasn't carrying bricks. He was giving orders. He walked through the site with authority, checking supplies, guiding workers, ensuring everything was running smoothly. Some laborers looked at him in disbelief. "He was one of us," they whispered. And that's when it hit Ravi. This wasn't just about him. His journey had proved that change was possible. If he could do it, so could others. Months later, Ravi started something no one expected, a free night school for laborers. Under the same street lamp where he once struggled to read, he now taught others. Workers who had never held a pen before learned to sign their names. Men who had accepted their fate as just laborers started to dream bigger. And one by one, they began to rise. As Ravi stood under that street lamp, watching a worker practice his letters, he smiled. He had once believed opportunities didn't exist for people like him. But the truth was, opportunities don't wait. You have to chase them. You have to fight for them. And when you finally reach them, you must create more for those who come after you. Because success isn't just about climbing up, it's about lifting others with you. The end.